Hi, I'm Abayomi,
I'm Anju.
and we're a couple, hence us being in bed together. Today we want to have a little discussion, as we do, just around some events that have just kind of just broken the internet. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Ange?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Jada and Will's entanglement, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more in detail. So, Jada and Will have just spoken about Jada's affair, shall we say, with August Alsina, as a result of obviously him coming out and sharing details of Jada and him being in a relationship. They responded to that with
A red table talk.
yeah, a red table talk. So Jada's obviously come out and said she had an entanglement with August,
Which was her euphemism for an affair, isn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
and I think, well, my views on it is that they've obviously spoken about it already. They've had the conversation. They've dealt with it, like they said, it happened years ago. They've come to a place where it's actually in the past. It's only kind of been brought to light as a result of August.
Indiscretion, isn't it? He's kind of come out with it, basically.
Yeah, and he's brought it out there, and they now have had to address it. And from my perspective, I think Jada just looks embarrassed. Like she's embarrassed by the whole situation. She's awkward. She could have chosen better words than entanglement, because it's not an entanglement. It's a conscious choice that she made to do what she did. So her choice of words, I don't think, were correct given the circumstances and the misery and the hurt that it would have caused Will and their family as a whole. So that's my perspective on the actual affair side of things. I think if she was going to come out and talk about it, it might have been best that she was very transparent and very honest about it. Again, it's not anybody's business,
Right.
in the sense of they don't need to say anything about it. But if you're going to do it, probably best to do it completely openly and honestly, and try and be more transparent about the whole situation.
And that lack of transparency, that kind of opaqueness of her language and her behaviour has kind of led people to kind of have, well, for the most part on the internet, Black Twitter, all the social media kind of outlets, the jokes that are kind of going around, the remixes of her voice, and
Right.
The songs that are kind of are being created, and memes and stuff about it. I think people's response is that first of all, it's just evil people for the most part kind of just mocking their sort of misfortune and the, what's happening with their marriage, which is ain't good. It's hate, really. That's whack, innit? That's whack. But then there is others who are genuinely
disappointed.
Disappointed because they hailed Will and Jada to be this perfect couple, or at least a couple in a perfect marriage. They sort of portray themselves as being a strong unit. They portray themselves as being sensitive to each other's needs, and and in love with each other. And obviously it's a beautiful black woman, it's a handsome black guy, they're both very successful, and as black people especially, we like to see good examples, because the world, the media, etc., tries to paint us as being these sort of wayward and deviant and disorganized kind of relationships, baby mamas and all this kind of rubbish. To see this faithful couple to see a faithful couple, or to see a couple making a success of their marriage, for us as black people, and just people generally, people who kind of just root for goodness and root for happy endings, you'd be putting them two as a sort of goals couple, And I think that's where the disappointment comes, because now you're learning, even though there's been rumours for years about them having an open marriage, etc., and there are rumours about loads of things, but I think even with the rumours, people sort of have this view of like, unless I know it's true, I'm going to choose to disbelieve it. Whereas now, out their own mouths and the horse's mouth, you're hearing that it did actually happen. And that's kind of where the disappointment's at.
Yeah, and that's not to say they weren't happy and they're not happy.
And
Who's to say that in that situation they didn't for that family, it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe it wasn't okay, but it's okay now. You know, like we've worked through things and spoke about
people go through things. Yeah,
exactly. And you know, I think for most part, marriage in general, it's more like Will and Jada, you know, than it is this fairy tale. Yeah. And you know that nothing bad happens in the marriage, and you know that we've got this idealistic view of marriage, and I think.
And that's the reason that we're having this discussion, because what this has done for us in terms of our kind of pillow talk situation is it's kind of highlighted things that we've been talking about for years, really, in the sense of marriage and people's perception of marriage and what marriage actually is. And it's clear to me, especially from conversations that have been happening online in the world today and over the last couple of days, that the world just doesn't understand what marriage is. Do you know what I mean? They don't get it. Do you know what I mean? And especially a public marriage. Well, it's not even a public marriage. These people are, you know, actors, artists who happen to be in the public light, who are living their life in a you know, living their life as a human being. But because they're in this public sphere, there's something about, you know, almost like the world sees it as, we can put our 2 pence in. It's, you know, they're a public marriage almost, but that's not what it is. But that's what it's become.
And you know, obviously, if you're in a place like that as a celebrity, you're going to get the scrutiny anyway. It's natural, isn't it?
Of course.
And people can say what they want to say, like that's also valid.
Yeah,
you know, people are going to talk about, you know, how come they did this and how come they did that. That's just life, isn't it? But for me, you know, it's really. I listen to people's comments. Well, I see people's comments and views and what, you know, how they see it. Like, oh, it's disgusting. You know, can't believe she done that. You know, and I'm like, well, you know, Will's an adult. You know, he's got choices. He's not been held hostage. Like, he can actually say, you know what, I ain't with this, and I'm going. I'm gone. I'm done. But he's there for a reason, and he loves her. She loves him clearly. And they're working through their situation. I just think it's unfair to say that things ain't perfect, innit? Just life is not perfect. We've got this view of marriage and life as being this perfect thing when as a matter of fact it actually isn't, because we go through things, you know, it's not always just adultery or you know, the worst that we think that could happen for, you know, in the world's eyes. It's like, you know, that's the worst thing that could happen in marriage. But you know, we go through death, we go through loss, we go through pain, we go through
financial upheaval, reversals,
you know, and so that's all devastating, you know, and can have the same sort of effects in the sense of, I don't want to do this anymore. Do you know what I mean? I've had enough, or we ain't got no money, or do you know what I mean? We want it.
Mental ill health, you know, those sort of things,
or just actual ill health,
physical ill health,
physical health, ill health, you know, and we just. You don't want to do it anymore.
But the point is that there's something about marriage being this sort of, again, because most people go via the sort of European Christian route. There's this thing about, you know, until death do us part. You know, in sickness and in health. You know, in good and in bad, all that kind of stuff. And so, because of that, there's this sort of sentiment, isn't there, that you kind of stick at it, and.
But only in those things. And if you notice, like it's almost like adultery is the cardinal sin in it. It's like, you know, I'll be with you in your ill health. I can deal with that. Or I can manage us going through a time of poverty. I can deal with that as well. But adultery, like, nah, like it's not happening. Like you're out the door, like that. It's almost like that's how it's seen. But
why do you think that is?
I think it's because it's very personal, isn't it? To the person that's been affected. It's really painful for start off, and it's emotional, and then there's a physical aspect, isn't there? In somebody committing adultery, there's a physical aspect that you have to deal with, that, you know, all the things that go with that, and the other person, the affected person, having to deal with that my partner's gone and done that, you know, and how does that now make me feel? You know, am I less of a person because of that, or, you know, am I not good enough?
That's right.
You know, and then you're challenging all of those kind of ideas and beliefs. And I think if you're not in a real relationship, you're never going to deal with those things, are you? You're not going to speak about it. You're not going to talk about it. You're not going to work through those things. And I think with Will and Jada, I've got real respect for them anyway. I always have done. But I think with them, And it's very difficult to say if you're unmarried, because watching them, it's just like, oh my God, you just shattered all my dreams.
Absolutely.
Forget it, man. You know, this marriage in this generation is dead. Like, forget
There's
it.
no such thing as the
Will,
perf.
if Will and Jada can't do it, it's I ain't gonna do it. Do you know what I mean? It's not gonna happen. Do you know what I mean? I'm not gonna pursue marriage. I'll just live my life in it and not pursue marriage. But I think Will and Jada's marriage, it's being married ourselves.
Yeah.
You can see that they have taken the time to work things out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they've been tempered.
And they're committed. They're committed to doing the right thing.
Yeah,
by
I've got
each
no,
other.
I've got no doubt that they'll be together forever. I have no doubt.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I feel like the same about ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's not pride or sort of fantasy. What that is, like you said, you can tell that they've been tempered. They've been tempered, and they're being tempered. You know, they're like, it's like, you know, chocolate or glass or whatever. Do you know what I mean? They've gone through the heat. They've cooled down. They've gone through the heat. You know, they've faced some stuff in life, and they've been tempered and built up this kind of resistance to and sort of, you know, proof themselves against the things that kind of would come against marriage, man. And it's just and the main thing about that is as well is it's all about people's perceptions and their own projections of what they want and they expect in it, as opposed to what's real. And what they've got is actually based in what the outside world has is actually based in fantasy. Do you know what I'm saying? Their idea of marriage is an actual fantasy. It doesn't exist. Do you know what I'm saying? My strong view about that is like you said as well. I think it's more with the adultery thing. The reason that's the cardinal sin is because it kind of causes the person who hasn't committed adultery to almost feel like that sort of sense of rivalry, or you know, again, look at themselves like, am I not enough, or am I not you know, the great person that I thought I was? And I think it actually speaks to this generation, because in this generation we've got people that are just consumed with like themselves in it. They're consumed with themselves. They're in relationships or in a marriage, but really it's two individual selfish people just doing themselves, but they happen to, because it's the thing to do. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like the rite of passage to become an adult. Do you know what I mean? You're not really an adult. You've been a silly, you know, you've been an immature adult until you actually settle down and do this marriage thing, right? Whereas even as a married couple, you and me, I would strongly say to anybody, man, like you need to be really thoughtful about whether or not marriage is for you. It is a commitment, and there are pitfalls in marriage. Marriage is not perfect, and it's not always the best way for everybody. Do you know what I'm saying? I would deter people almost to get married. You know, in order to not, certainly without consideration, and also, even with that, what can you consider? Like, the only thing that you can consider is about how you're going to respond to situations and what your commitments are and your values are. Because the truth is, when we got married, you know, we stood at an altar and we made certain vows. If I'm honest, many of them that I cannot remember, and there's a reason that I can't remember them, because they were not my values. Do you know what I'm saying? I was repeating something because there was a minister encouraging me to repeat these things as the gatekeeper into what I wanted, which was marriage, and it to be with you, right? And so, but that order of things, I would not have chosen it that way. You know, in my right mind, I would not have chosen it that way. I would have chosen for us to be together, and have everything that you have in marriage, but maybe say my own words and explain from my own heart what I think. But we, in this world, we've got this kind of this setup in it, and especially in the European Christianized world, we've got this sort of setup where, you know, when we say marriage, it almost means, it's a thing, isn't it? It means something. It means, when someone says they got married, it's like, okay, you had a white dress. There's assumptions that can be made about it, because we all do this marriage thing the same way, and that's why people are saying, you know, I'm disappointed, and it's an assault against, you know, the sanctity of marriage. You never hear that word sanctity in any other context apart from marriage, innit?
Yeah.
What about the sanctity of parenthood?
Yeah.
Innit? And what they mean by that is this sort of institution of marriage is this kind of God-given thing. You know what I mean? They speak about it as if like God himself, the creator of you know, all of nature and everything, you know, on the earth and around it,
and for them
has made this thing marriage and given it to us. But that's totally untrue.
Yeah,
anyway,
but I was gonna say, like, just from a Christian perspective, that's what it is, isn't it? Like, you can't knock that view in the sense of that's what they believe, that is their life is centered around that. But I think, like you said, Western society is obviously based on that as well, Christian values.
Absolutely.
So that's why we've got this whole idea of a one woman, one man marriage.
Right. But I mean, you just said you can't knock it. I can knock it. You know, my view.
No, you can knock the view, but I'm saying from their perspective,
no, that's what I'm saying.
because they are a Christian.
That's what I'm saying.
That's their belief system.
But that's what
isn't
I'm
it?
saying. I'm saying I could knock their views using their own Bible. So Christians on the net today are talking about Will and Jada Jada specifically has violated the sanctity of marriage because she had sex with some. Yeah, she committed adultery, right? But what is adultery? Like, in the Bible, you won't see one man and one woman as the model, but we've taken that and that's not biblical. So what I'm saying is, my knocking of Christians and of Christian values in terms of the religious Christian now looking at marriage is within your own frame of reference. Marriage is not a one man, one woman thing. Show me in the Bible where that exists. It doesn't exist. We've got the example of Adam and Eve as the first man and first woman. If you're a Christian or if you believe Christian values, you'll believe that it was Adam and Eve, a male and a female. And actually Eve, according to the Bible, came out of Adam, so they're actually one anyway, right? Out of his rib, or what, you know, the word can also be translated to mean cell. So, you know, God did some genetics there, if that's what you believe. Or let's say it's as literal as we read it, it's a rib. The woman came out of man, right? Which means that if Adam stood next to his rib, that's, you know, even though it's out of his body, it's him, isn't it? It's one. And so if the woman came from that rib, then she and him are already one, right? But they manifest in two different people, a man and a woman, Adam and Eve, right? But there's no ritual of marriage. There's no altar. There's none of the things that we do now that we call wedding and marriage. There's none of that. But Adam begins to procreate with this woman. Is that not? They're not married. What's all that about? Like, just saying. But
yeah, there's no like
no
ceremony.
Yeah.
Like for,
Thank you. There's no model or ceremony for how this thing is supposed to be. But then Christians along the way adding things to scripture and adding culture, white European culture and the ways that, you know, the Vikings, etc., the Romans, etc., the Greeks, etc., have done it. They've added that to Christianity, and then they've come together with what we now look at as the white wedding, right? Which is full of all kinds of mystical things and religious things, and you know, and they've taken that as being marriage or being the wedding. Do you know what I'm saying? So so to kind of correct you on that, from my point of view, I think you can knock them because it's all a fantasy. You know what I mean? That is a fantasy. God created man and women, if you believe that, and they did what human beings do. You know what I mean? They procreated. And then as you go on in scripture, you'll find the likes of David, the likes of you know, the patriarchs, Jacob, Isaac, man like that, who had multiple wives, and God never corrected them. God didn't say no, that's not what I want. You know, at the same time as God was saying, don't worship pagans and don't do X, Y, and Z, he never ever corrected them about doing that. And that was marriage. So what I'm trying to say is, it's a subject. No, I know. But I'm just going off the back of what you're saying. I'm saying we could knock people's religious views about marriage because they're projecting their views on Will and Jada based upon this fallacy of what they believe. Okay, if you believe that, then go ahead and you do that and see how well that works for you, right? There's only 50% of marriages in this current time that work, right? So you know, it's a literally hit and miss situation in terms of marriage and people's commitment and people's values, right? But I think it starts from the beginning. It starts from our view of what we think marriage is. And that's why Will and Jada are where they are now, and that's why conversations are being had in the way that the perspectives are being shared in the way they are now, because people have a real shaky view of what they think marriage is. Marriage is not one man, one woman. There are different ways of doing marriage, is what I'm trying to say to you.
Absolutely.
I'm saying
and different ways of dealing with what happens within marriage.
Definitely.
Now, you know, when they got married, they might have had that same thought process and values and ideas about marriage. You know, that I'm getting married to you and I expect to stay with you.
In monogamy.
Yeah. And along the way, obviously, things have happened. And, you know, it's clear from that interview, and you know, that red table talk between Will and Jada, that things have happened prior to Jada's indiscretion, you know, and that, you know, it's really interesting, the comments that people are making about it, but have totally bypassed the fact that possibly Will had affairs in the past, which is very apparent and clear as day in that video. But we want to single out Jada for some reason. Like, she's nasty and she's this, and you know, how can you, you know, you know, if you say anything, you know, you're condoning her. You know, I got told, you know, you sound like you're condoning her behaviour, and it's not about condoning, because she don't have to answer to me. She don't know me, you know. The only person that she has to answer to is Will, her husband. Absolutely. And so it's clear that they've had that conversation, and Will looks very upset. Clearly, obviously, he's going to be upset. It's a very a personal issue and a situation, and it's very emotional, isn't it, for them? So to have to talk about it now when they probably thought it was done and dusted, and then having to come out now and address it again, it brings it back up again actually, and now the world knows, isn't it? So that's another set of issues that Will's probably facing. But then again, it's very clear that he loves her and he's going to stay with her. So you know what have we got to do? Say, you know, what's our business in that?
And people forget as well, it's marriage is not, for some it is if you're mentally this way, but it's not a prison cell. If you choose to exit that thing, you can. There is such a thing as divorce. There is such a thing as separation. There is such a thing as just walking away and saying, you know what, I'm done with this thing. And Will's a strong enough guy to be able to do that. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's not. He's not in it. He's not in it.
Adult, for crying out loud. It's not a baby. You know, like that you can say, oh, shall I go? Shall I not go? You know, like, no, you're an adult. Like he's old enough to say, you know what, I'm done with this. So. And
he's choosing not to.
Exactly.
And actually, what that does for me is. That makes me give him even more ratings. It's not, for me, it's not devastating. Being in a marriage and understanding it and seeing, okay, I can see what's going on there. It makes me actually not feel you know, demoralised by it or disappointed. I actually feel like, rah, that's real marriage. They're going through some real dirt and rubbish and crap. And they're actually coming through refined at the end of it. Do you know what I'm saying? And they might not have already come through. Like you said, it's happened years ago. But everything's a process, isn't it? Everything's a process. But we're scared of the process as human beings, especially in this generation. We're so snowflakey and so built of such weak fabric and such weak commitment that any sort of reversal or problem or situation that arises, we almost see it as like, oh, it must not be for me then. This we're going through trouble, so this thing must not be, you know, it must not be God's will for us, or it must not be, you know, the universe is trying to tell us something. No, in life there are difficulties in it, right? But what people who are strong, or what strong marriages do, is, or people in strong marriages do, is they bunker down in it. They hunker down. They do what they're supposed to do in it.
And you know, like in those kind of situations as well. It's all, everything's variable, isn't it? Like, so if the person wasn't repentant or remorseful about it, then it would be, I'm sure they'd be having a totally different conversation. I'm sure it's some, you know, there's a conversation about, oh, she should just apologise. I'm sure she has apologised at some point. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on that table talking to one another if there was no apology. That's like, got to remember, people have got a life outside of a set.
That's
you know what I mean? Like, they've had probably the deep conversation about it.
I'm down to
yeah, like, you know, the apology's already been said. You know, they've moved on. They're having to do this have a very public process now. They've already processed it within their own marriage and within their own life and family. Now it's very public, like their friends, their family members that probably didn't know, their kids, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? They might not have known, but now it's brought all that up. You know, they might have shielded their children from that, but now they're having to publicly go through this again, which is probably very, very painful. So the emotional side and the pain that you can see in Will's eyes, I get it. Do you know what I mean? You can totally understand why that's going on, and the embarrassment for Jada. You can see that as well, and that the laughter sometimes, you know, they're laughing their way through. It's embarrassing, isn't it? So you kind of you know, it's natural. Like, I just don't understand how some people can watch things like that and just don't understand human behaviour, like human nature.
But they do say that we don't see the world as it is; we see the world as we are. Right? People are seeing their marriage in light of how they think as single people they would carry their marriage, you know, out or execute their marriage. They're not seeing Will and Jada; they're seeing themselves in that situation. If it was me, I wouldn't take that. Because that's how they are, and that's why they won't have a successful marriage. They won't have 25 years. 25 years. They won't have 25 years. And this is the thing: this ain't no new marriage. This is a marriage that's kind of showed you the test of time. And 25 years is a quarter of a century. Do you know what I'm saying? Right? And most of the people that are talking aren't even 25 years old. You know what I'm saying? They give these opinions about marriage based upon something that they've never encountered themselves. And if they do encounter it with that attitude, they won't see 25 years. So we have to give some sort of credit and kudos to Will and Jada for even making that milestone. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah. I totally agree.
So yeah, I think there's something about just fantasy in marriage and people's expectations, and ultimately what I'm saying is I feel like people should just mind their own business. Like, their marriage is nothing to do with you. They've actually kind of been a little bit gracious, maybe a bit foolish in sort of addressing the situation, because I think in their mind They just thought, you know, we'll lay it out there, we'll get it edited, it will be what it needs to be. People can hear it, you know, from our lips. But what it's actually done is it's kind of fed into people's bad mindedness, first of all, but also just people's crazy expectations of somebody else's marriage. Like, it's none of your business, right? You know, we shouldn't even really be speaking into it, right? What it is. Go on.
I was going to say, for me, it was quite apparent that maybe, you know, when she first started talking, she talked about how she really wanted to address the situation about Will giving permission. Like, so I felt like maybe, you know, like in their household, Will being the victim of it.
Yeah.
You're already feeling like, oh my gosh, all this has happened, and now obviously it's been brought back up, and now the headlines are that Will's given permission about this affair. Like, you know. So she made it very clear that she wanted to address that, which kind of goes to show why they probably did it as well. They wanted to put things set them
to make sure that Will wasn't further victimised by the and it's got, as a man especially, and
that showed Jada's heart to me as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I think you need to see more than what's just being said, like the actual situation, you know, like context. People just are just seeing it as she's done that, like, you know, that's disgusting, it's nasty, like, and she's not even apologetic, and, you know, an entanglement, like, you know, she could have been, like I said, if she's gonna do it, she could have been a little bit more humble. For the camera, even, do you know what I mean? Because obviously they've dealt with it, but but
ultimately, nobody's business. Your marriage is your own marriage. If you've agreed, say he had agreed to whatever. I think in business, isn't it? That's for him to do, like, or for them to do, right? If the man can put up with that, or he's happy for that to be the case, which is not a bother to him, then why can't that happen? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, what one man wants isn't what another man would want in his marriage. What one woman wants isn't what another woman would want in their marriage. But we keep projecting as people, you know, what we think marriage is. Marriage is it's a social construct. It's something that we as society have made up. It doesn't exist outside of our agreement, and good marriages won't exist outside of the two people that are involved in its agreement, or the X amount of people that's involved in its agreement. You know, it's about agreement. That's the only thing that exists in marriage, and that's the only reality about marriage is it is whatever you agree on, right? Now, even with vows in it, you're allowed to, you know. You're allowed to change your vows slightly in it and have you know, a less religious you know, vow exchange. You can sort of have paganistic ones, or, you know, kind of make up your own words now, which is, you know, we've been married too long for that to be the case. It wasn't the case when we were you know, when we were getting married, but you know, people are sort of warming to the idea now of making it a bit more personal. But how creepy is that? Because marriage should always have been a personal thing, isn't it? And ultimately, I think marriage really is about business, isn't it? It's a contract, it is an agreement, you know, in a sort of a loving way, but governments and
set up at the start of it,
that's what it should be. But they've kind of hijacked it, and they've made it into this sort of commercial and industrial thing where, you know, almost you're joining yourselves together as a business entity, and I think some of that is about kind of keeping us docile as well. To be honest, I feel like you know, two people that love each other, why is that not a marriage? How is that not a marriage? If you agree together, you might never walk down the aisle together. And, you know, we know people, we've got family members and friends.
Been in relationships,
strong, long goals relationships, and even as us as a couple, we look towards them and think, wow, that's a couple, and they're not married, but they're definitely married. You understand? So, and again, going back to the original, you know, the kind of prototype in terms of Adam and Eve, if you believe that. They didn't go down no aisle neither. Do you know what I mean? So what is marriage is the question that I sort of throw up there, innit? What is it? What is marriage? Marriage is simply an agreement between those who are involved in the marriage, be they two people or be they multiples of people. It's about agreement between the people that are in the parties that are in that marriage, going ahead and do what they need to do. And some of those are very successful. You know, we know, as we said, of marriages that have marriages that haven't necessarily gone down the aisle and done ceremony, but are really, really successful. We know of, you know, religious people, but not Christians, like so Muslims, for example, who have their 4 wives and they're extremely successful. We know about Indian, Hindu, Sikh marriages that were arranged. You know, they met sort of moments before they actually did the ceremony, only having seen a picture of each other, you know, before that time. You know, there's different ways of doing things, man. You know, some wear wedding rings, some don't wear wedding rings. You know, some are monogamous, some are not monogamous. Like, ultimately, it's not about what you think marriage is. That you do that in your marriage.
Yeah, it's true.
the only thing that's real about marriage is that it's an agreement between whoever's
the
doing
two
it.
people that are involved,
Or more.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, yeah, that's exactly what I think. You know, like, just when you're in a marriage, you've got to agree on the things that you're going to agree on, allow, compromise, and make decisions on. You know, that's the choice that you make.
That's right.
Between the two people,
That's
and
right.
or the multiple people, or however it is.
And go on. Sorry.
Yeah, like, go on.
I was going to say, and there's also something, I was just thinking about what you just said there about choosing to sort of compromise and whatever, because there is something about flexibility as well, isn't there, where you might enter into a marriage on these terms, but as you're walking together, you realise, imagine we've never done this before, but actually this is permissible, or this is what we want to do, or we want to you know, move to Australia, or do you know, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's different, you can be flexible about. You must be, in fact, you can be. You must be. A successful marriage has to be flexible. So it's about agreement, but it's a dynamic agreement. It's something that kind of changes, and you sort of check in with each other and make sure that's what you're both agreeing in it. You have to keep agreeing along the way. Yeah. And at the points or junctures that you don't agree, that's where the risk is for you to break off or walk away. Yeah. And you have that right and that choice. You know what I'm saying? It's interesting. Going back to what we said about the sort of cardinal sin. Adultery being a cardinal sin, I think it's because, again, people have, even if you're not Christian, you are influenced by Christian, European, Western values concerning marriage. And obviously in the Bible it talks about when Jesus was questioned about it, he kind of gave his comments on what was permissible in terms of breaking away from marriage. So marriage is sacred according to Jesus, and it shouldn't be broken in terms of divorce. But he gave the permission for adultery, and I think that's what it is. You understand?
Yeah, you're right.
That's what does it. So people see it like, you know, this is the ground, right, and God won't be angry at me in this situation. That's your belief, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's your belief. Yeah. But that creates a problem, because now you've got countless people that are in marriages. For example, we know of people who are in very unhappy marriages. You know, husband's a domestic violence perpetrator. Wife feels the weight of guilt to leave that man, so she's going to end up dead, basically. Do you know what I'm saying? Come man want to clap it up every day. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's about being wise in those situations, isn't it? So you go to a church council and they'd be like, you know, sister, you know, it's about the only grounds that you can sort of break up is adultery. The man hasn't committed adultery, but he's beating you every day. Do you know what I'm saying? Is that what is that? So we've kind of created. We've almost robbed the magic of marriage in it. Do you know what I'm saying? We've made it this thing that it so isn't. I think Will and Jada.
And I was saying, you know, what I was saying to you earlier today, like, just I think the rules part of it
conditions
make it more difficult.
Of course,
I think it's more enslaving and entrapment in it. Right. Like, you just feel like. I think if there wasn't that, if you didn't have any of that basis, and
you went to work at your own agreement.
Me, do you know what I mean? If I'm honest, like, up until probably about 3 years ago, I probably would have been on that vein as well. But as you learn, you grow, you see people around you, and you
evolve,
watch other people. Watch other people around you, and you're like, actually, you know, you think about things and how things are, and it's like, you know what, reality is nothing's sweet, is it? Like, and not everything's fantastic and perfect and lovely and ideal. That's just not reality, is it? Like, the reality is it's ugly, it's dark, it's painful and it's emotional. That's what happens in it, you know. And but in those times when you're going through things, that is when I think marriage and relationship is deepened.
Absolutely.
And the beauty of marriage comes out.
The tempering, that's exactly what I was talking about, So, and ultimately it's a relationship of love, isn't it? Like, you know, you're not gonna in your relationship you're not trying to hurt each other, and you're not trying to do no wickedness against each other if you truly do love each other. So it's almost a safe microcosm of all the things that you just said. There is pain, all the rest of it, but it's a safe and beautiful pain, isn't it? It's family, it's life, isn't it? It's reality. It's ups and downs, man, but ultimately it's your marriage. It's not anyone else's marriage. And even though we all call it marriage, we all talk about different things. Your version of this marriage thing is so different from mine. It's so different. There's no two marriages that are alike, and if they are alike, they're dead or dying. Do you know what I mean? You can't live your life based upon the model that your parents gave you, or
what do you mean they're dead or dying?
What do I mean? I mean, if you're trying to copy someone else's marriage in terms of your life with your partner or partners, then your marriage is dying. It's dead or dying, because you have to live it.
Yeah,
literally, in the now, and with the minute decisions and agreements that you and that person or persons make. You have to. If you're trying to copy someone else's marriage, I'm doing this because my mum did it or my dad did it. Dead or dying. Dead or dying. So I've got the utmost respect for Will. I've got the utmost respect for Jada. You know, and I see their marriage not as being a fairy tale marriage, because fairy tales are fairy tales, right? And why would you want to live a fairy tale anyway? You don't need to do. We need to do a part 2 of this and talk more about the kind of fairy tale thing. I think we should do that straight after this. Right? Is that all right with you? Yeah. But we'll close this one now, just by saying, from my point of view, you can kind of end it finally. But penultimately, I've got massive respect for them. I think their marriage it's not a fairy tale. It's reality. It's a real marriage, and it's got 25 years of history, and yeah, man, like, come on, that deserves a salute, man. That's big. That's big. That's not a joke. That's big.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So more power to Will, more power to Jada, man. What's your thinking? Finally.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, although I think it's a really commendable thing that they've been married 25 years, I've seen 30 years plus marriages that ain't always happy. It's just a marriage of convenience. So that's not always the case. And it's a great marriage because it's been such a long length of time. But from my perspective and from what I can see about them, is that they definitely have got a very real and honest relationship going on, and they speak about things, and they you can just see it between them, their interactions with one another, their interactions with their children, their interactions with other people around their family and friends. You know, you watch how they speak and how they talk, you can tell it's built on deep and real conversations. So for me, you know, they're only going to go from strength to strength because their ultimate aim and goal is that they love each other, you know, and they're gonna stick at it because they do love each other, and that's what holds it together, doesn't it? At the end of the day, if you've got love, like a deep love, do you know what I mean? Because again, love is subjective in today's world, but from what I can see, that they are deeply in love and they've got a real relationship, so they're gonna make it. You know, they're gonna make it.
Yeah, without that.
And if they don't, like, it'll be again, you know, because of a decision and a choice. So, but from what I can see,
and they're allowed to make that choice.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, for real. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for listening. Give us comments, man. You know, everyone's got different views about it, and we never ever claim to be experts, except to be experts by experience. But we'll do a part 2 to this because I think it's a real deep and wide discussion. So yeah, see you guys on the other side.
Bye.